Somewhere between your first paycheck and your last, the rules of money completely change. What worked at 30 becomes dangerous at 60. What felt like security becomes a trap. And the biggest decisions, the ones involving houses and mortgages and where you'll spend the next 20 years, suddenly carry weight they never had before. Warren Buffett has never shouted about real estate. He's never promised you could flip your way to fortune or that home ownership was the American dream wrapped in a mortgage. What he's done instead is something far more valuable. He's watched, he's waited, and he's understood something most people miss entirely, that a house is not just an investment, and that timing isn't everything, but it's close. Before we go further, let me be clear about something. Nothing here is financial advice. I'm not telling you what to do with your money or your life. What I'm offering is perspective, the kind that comes from studying one man's choices across 7 decades and seeing patterns that illuminate truth. The rest is yours to consider. So let's consider this carefully. Buffett bought his house in Omaha in 1958 for $31,500. He still lives there. That's not a story about frugality. Though he is famously frugal, it's not even a story about real estate. Though the numbers are striking, it's a story about knowing the difference between an asset and a liability, between what serves your life and what complicates it. He could have bought anywhere. He could have owned mansions in 6 cities. He could have done what so many wealthy people do, turn their homes into statements, their addresses into declarations of arrival. But he understood something that takes most people decades to learn. The purpose of a house is to house you. Everything else is distraction. Now watch what happens when you apply that lens to 2026. The housing market right now is caught in a strange tension. Mortgage rates that climbed higher than they'd been in 20 years. Home prices that refuse to soften despite the squeeze. Inventory so tight that buyers are still competing in multiple offer situations. And underneath it all, a generation of people over 50 who are trying to figure out if this is the moment to buy, to sell, to downsize, to relocate, or to simply stay put and wait. Buffett would tell you, has told you in various ways over the years, that the question isn't about 2026. The question is about need, purpose, and what you're actually buying. Here's what most people miss. They think about a house as an investment first and a home second. Buffett thinks about it the other way around, and that inversion changes everything. Let's get practical. When Buffett evaluates any purchase, whether it's a company, a stock, or a piece of property, he asks a ruthlessly simple question. What is this worth to me over time, independent of what someone else might pay for it tomorrow? That question eliminates noise. It strips away the speculation, the fear of missing out, the anxiety about appreciation. It forces you to confront the actual value of the thing itself. For a house, that means asking, will this improve my life? Will it simplify my days or complicate them? Will it free me or bind me? Can I afford it without stress, without leverage that keeps me awake at night, without sacrificing the security I've spent 40 years building? If you can answer yes to those questions, then the market conditions are almost irrelevant. If you can't, then no amount of timing will make it the right choice. Buffett has lived through every housing cycle since the 1950s. He's seen the post-war boom, the savings and loan crisis, the subprime disaster of 2008, and everything in between. And his position has remained remarkably consistent. A house is a consumption item with some investment characteristics, not an investment with some consumption characteristics. That distinction matters enormously after 50, because by the time you're in your 60s, the margin for error is gone. You don't have 30 years to ride out a correction. You don't have decades of earning power ahead to absorb a mistake. What you have is a finite window, a fixed pool of resources, and the profound responsibility to protect what you've built. This is where discipline becomes everything. Consider this carefully. Buffett's wealth isn't built on brilliant individual decisions. It's built on decades of avoiding stupid ones. He didn't need to be the smartest person in the room. He just needed to consistently not be the dumbest. The same principle applies to buying a house in your later years. The dumb decision isn't buying in a high market. It's not even paying too much for something you love. The dumb decision is stretching. It's leveraging yourself beyond comfort because you're afraid of missing out or because you believe prices will only go up. It's buying complexity when you need simplicity, or buying status when you need peace. Here's the truth no one talks about. Most regret in retirement doesn't come from missing opportunities. It comes from taking risks you couldn't afford. Buffett has said repeatedly that risk comes from not knowing what you're doing, not from market conditions, not from timing, not from external circumstances, from not understanding the game you're playing. So let's understand the game. In 2026, if you're over 50 and considering buying a house, you're playing a different game than a 30-year-old. The 30-year-old has time as a cushion, earnings growth as a possibility, decades of inflation working in their favor. You have something more valuable but less flexible, accumulated wealth that needs to be protected, not gambled. Buffett's approach to real estate has always been brutally pragmatic. He doesn't own it unless it generates cash flow or serves a specific essential function. His house serves the function of shelter and stability. His investments in real estate, through Berkshire's various holdings, serve the function of predictable returns. What he doesn't do is blur those lines. He doesn't convince himself that his personal residence is building his wealth. He knows exactly what it is, a place to live that doesn't interfere with the wealth he's actually building elsewhere. Let me show you something. In 2008, when the housing market collapsed, Buffett made one of his most quoted observations: buy a house when you need a house, not when rates are low, not when prices are attractive, not when your neighbor's doing it, when you need it. That sentence contains more wisdom than most real estate seminars, because need is the only honest anchor. Everything else is speculation dressed up as strategy. Pay attention to this moment. We're living through a period where the cost of housing has become disconnected from the fundamentals that made it accessible for previous generations. A median home price that requires a median income to stretch far beyond comfort. A rental market that offers no relief. A lending environment that's tightened just enough to lock out marginal buyers but not enough to force sellers to capitulate. Into this environment, millions of retirees and near retirees are trying to make decisions. Should they sell the family home and downsize? Should they relocate to a lower-cost area? Should they buy that condo in Florida or Arizona or wherever the dream has been planted? Buffett would ask you to strip away the dream and look at the numbers, not the numbers of appreciation or what the market might do. The numbers of your own life, What can you afford without touching your principal? What payment, mortgage, insurance, taxes, maintenance, can you sustain on the income you have today, not the income you hope to have or the sale proceeds you're counting on? This is where most people fool themselves. They calculate based on best-case scenarios. Buffett calculates based on worst-case realities. He's never leveraged Berkshire to the point where a bad year could threaten the enterprise. He's never taken debt that required perfection to service, and he's never, ever confused solvency with wealth. Your house decision works the same way. If buying requires you to be right about the next 5 years, right about your health, right about the market, right about your expenses, right about everything, then you're not buying security. You're buying risk with a roof. Here's the deeper pattern. Buffett's entire investment philosophy rests on one foundation: margin of safety. Buy things for less than they're worth. Hold more cash than feels comfortable. Structure your life so that multiple things can go wrong without catastrophe. A house decision that follows that philosophy looks different than the average purchase. It means you buy only if you can put down enough to make the payment comfortable. Only if you can maintain the property without stress. Only if the location serves your actual life, not some imagined future self. Only if selling your current situation improves your life materially, not marginally. This is where it gets interesting, because most people approach housing from a position of scarcity thinking. They're afraid of missing out, afraid of being priced out forever, afraid that waiting means losing. Buffett approaches everything from a position of abundance thinking. Not abundance of money, though he has that. Abundance of options. He structures his life so he's never forced to make a decision on someone else's timeline. That's the real wisdom for 2026. If you need to buy a house, truly need it, for reasons that make your life better in concrete, measurable ways, then buy it. But buy it with enough margin that you're not dependent on the market cooperating. Buy it with enough conservatism that you can still sleep at night if values drop 20%. Buy it knowing that the value is in living there, not in selling it later. If you don't need to buy, if you're comfortable where you are, if the cost of moving exceeds the benefit, then Buffett would tell you what he's told investors about stocks for decades. The best move is often no move at all. Something shifts here, because what we're really talking about isn't housing. It's the psychology of decision-making in the second half of life. You worked 40 years for your money, maybe more. You saved, sacrificed, delayed gratification, made 1,000 small decisions that added up to security. And now, someone is telling you that you need to take that security and put it at risk because it's 2020 and the market is doing something. Buffett would call that noise. And he spent 7 decades tuning out noise. The noise says you have to act now. The wisdom says you have to act right. The noise says everyone is buying. The wisdom says you're not everyone. The noise says prices will keep rising. The wisdom says prices do whatever they do, and you can only control what you pay and whether you can afford it. By the time you're 60, you've learned that the crowd is usually wrong about timing and almost always wrong about urgency. You've seen enough cycles to know that markets mean revert, that what goes up eventually comes down, and that the only constant is change. Buffett has built his fortune on that understanding, not by being contrarian for the sake of it, but by being rational when others are emotional. Right now, housing is emotional. For buyers, it's fear of missing out and frustration with prices. For sellers, it's anchoring to peak values and resistance to reality. For retirees, it's anxiety about making the right choice in a market that feels increasingly disconnected from common sense. Into that emotion, Buffett offers something radical: patience. Not patience as passivity, patience as discipline, the willingness to wait for the right opportunity at the right price for the right reasons. Let's pause here, because there's a version of this decision where buying in 2026 makes perfect sense, where the math works, where the need is genuine, where the margin of safety exists. Maybe you're selling a larger home and downsizing to something that cuts your costs in half. Maybe you're moving closer to family for reasons that have nothing to do with real estate and everything to do with the years you have left. Maybe you've found a place that fits your retirement life so perfectly that the price is secondary to the value of living there. Those are Buffett decisions. They're rational, clear-eyed, based on need rather than speculation. What he wouldn't do, what he's never done, is buy something because he's afraid of missing out, or because rates might go higher, or because he thinks he can flip it in 3 years for a profit. He doesn't think in 3-year horizons. He thinks in forever horizons. And for a house you're going to live in after 60, forever means the rest of your life. That time frame changes everything. Because if you're buying a place to live for the next 20 years, then what the market does in year 1, year 2, even year 5 matters very little. What matters is whether you can afford it for all 20 years, whether it serves your life for all 20 years, whether you can wake up in year 15 and still be glad you bought it. Buffett's house has served him for 67 years, not because it's appreciated into the millions, though it has, not because it was a shrewd investment, though it was, but because it's been perfectly adequate for the life he wanted to live, and he never had to think about it again. There's profound freedom in that. Consider how much energy most people spend on housing, upgrading, renovating, refinancing, worrying about values, checking comparables, calculating equity. Buffett spent that energy building Berkshire Hathaway. He didn't have to, because he made one good decision in 1958 and let it be. That's the model. One good decision, made carefully, maintained properly, and then left alone to serve its purpose. For you in 2026, that might mean buying. It might mean selling. It might mean doing nothing at all. But whatever you choose, make it a decision you can let be. Make it something that frees your attention for what matters rather than consuming your attention for years to come. This is the part nobody wants to hear. There's a decent chance that buying in 2026 will not be optimal timing. There's a decent chance that rates will eventually come down, that prices will eventually soften, that the market will offer better opportunities in 2027 or 2028. But Buffett would tell you that waiting for optimal timing is how people end up never doing anything. Or worse, doing the right thing at exactly the wrong moment because they waited so long that urgency overrode judgment. The goal isn't perfect timing. The goal is sound judgment at whatever timing you choose. Sound judgment after 50 means being more conservative than you think you need to be. It means stress testing every assumption. It means assuming things will cost more and take longer and be more complicated than you expect. It means building in buffer upon buffer until the decision feels almost boring in its safety. Boring is good. Boring is what lets you sleep at night. Boring is what Buffett has chosen for 7 decades, and it's made him one of the wealthiest people in human history. Not through brilliance, through boring. Avoid debt. Avoid drama. Avoid dumb risks. That 3-part formula applies to buying a house as much as it applies to buying a stock. Maybe more, because you can't sell part of your house if you need cash. You can't diversify a mortgage, you're all in for better or worse. Buffett is famously allergic to being all in on anything that requires faith rather than analysis. He wants assets that generate cash, that have tangible value, that don't depend on the kindness of future buyers to make sense. A house you're going to live in passes the test only if you're not depending on selling it to fund your retirement. Only if it's part of your life structure, not your investment portfolio. Here's the truth. If you have to sell your house to retire, you can't afford the house. If you're counting on appreciation to make your financial plan work, you don't have a financial plan. If buying means you're tight on cash, vulnerable to a surprise expense, or one bad year away from trouble, then you already know the answer. Buffett knew it in 1958, and he knows it now. The purpose of money is to give you options and peace of mind. Anything that reduces options or peace of mind, no matter how much it might appreciate, is working against you. By 60, by 65, by 70, peace of mind isn't negotiable. You've earned it, you've paid for it, and no house, no matter how beautiful, is worth trading it away. So here's what Buffett would ask you to consider. Not what the market is doing, but what you need. Not what your friends are doing, but what your life requires. Not what might happen to prices, but what you can afford regardless of what happens. If you can answer those questions honestly and buying still makes sense, then buy with confidence and never look back. If you can't, then the bravest, wisest thing you can do is wait, or stay, or find a different answer entirely, because the real secret, the one that took Buffett decades to fully understand and live, is that wealth isn't about owning the most or the best or the newest. It's about having enough, structured properly, giving you the freedom to live the life you want without fear. A house is either part of that structure or it isn't. In 2026, with rates where they are and prices where they are and uncertainty where it is, the answer depends entirely on your specific situation, your resources, your needs, your stage of life, your margin of safety. What Buffett offers isn't permission to buy or permission to wait. It's permission to think clearly, to ignore the noise, to make a decision based on your reality rather than someone else's urgency. That permission is more valuable than any timing strategy. There's a deeper question underneath all of this. It's the question that Buffett has spent his entire life answering through his choices, his discipline, his refusal to be stampeded by crowds or seduced by complexity. The question is this: what do you actually need to be happy? Not comfortable, not impressive, not secure against every possible future, just happy. Content, at peace with your choices and your life. For Buffett, the answer has never included a mansion. It's never included multiple homes or vacation properties or any of the trappings that usually come with wealth at his level. What it's included is simplicity, independence, and the freedom to spend his time exactly as he chooses. That's what his house in Omaha represents. Not frugality for frugality's sake, but the recognition that beyond a certain point, more house doesn't mean more happiness. It means more complexity, more maintenance, more worry, more things that can go wrong. After 50, Happiness comes from subtraction more than addition, from simplifying rather than accumulating, from knowing what's enough and having the discipline to stop there. A house decision is one of the last major financial decisions most people make. It's the thing that will frame your retirement years, that will consume a significant portion of your resources, that will either support your life or complicate it. Buffett would tell you to approach it the way he's approached everything, with rationality, with patience, with a ruthless focus on what serves your actual life rather than some imagined ideal. The market will do what it does. Prices will fluctuate, rates will change, opportunities will come and go. None of that matters as much as making sure that whatever you choose, you can live with it comfortably for as long as you need to. That's not about predicting the future. It's about building enough buffer into the present that the future can unfold however it wants, and you'll be fine. Let me leave you with this. Buffett is 94 years old now. He's still in the house he bought when Eisenhower was president. He's still going to the office, still thinking clearly, still making decisions with the same rationality that's guided him for 7 decades. And if you asked him today whether someone should buy a house in 2026, he'd probably tell you the same thing he told people in 1986, in 2006, in every year in between. Buy it if you need it. Buy it if you can afford it without stress. Buy it if it makes your life better in ways you can measure. And then forget about what the market does, because you didn't buy an investment. You bought a home. Everything else is just noise. The years after 50 are too precious to spend worrying about whether you timed the housing market correctly. They're too valuable to waste on decisions that rob you of peace or freedom or the simple pleasure of knowing you're secure. Buffett figured that out early, and it served him well. Not just financially, but in every way that matters. You've worked long enough to deserve the same. A life structured around what you need, insulated against what you fear, simple enough to manage and secure enough to enjoy. Whether that includes buying a house in 2026 is a decision only you can make, but make it the Buffett way, calmly, rationally, with eyes wide open to the risks and clear about the purpose. And then, whatever you choose, let it be. Let it serve you, and turn your attention to the years ahead, knowing you made the best decision you could with the information you had and the wisdom you've earned. That's all any of us can do, and it's enough.